Oh, hello, great readers. I'm Bill Chan.
I'm Nimacum.
I'm Van Chan.
In this class, I'll read to all of you a part of Ulysses,
S.
L.
Ulysses, James Joyce. Chap 16 Sec 1. Preparatory to anything else, Mr. Bloom brushed off the greater bulk of the shavings and handed Stephen the hat and ash splint and backed him up generally in orthodox Samaritan fashion, which he very badly needed. His Stephen's mind was not exactly what you would call wandering, but a bit unsteady, and on his expressed desire for some beverage to drink Mr. Bloom in view of the right was in there being no pump of artery water available for their ablutions, let alone drinking purposes, hit upon an expedient by suggesting, off the rail, the propriety of the cabman's shelter, as it was called, hardly a stone's throw away near Buckbridge, where they might hit upon some drinkables in the shape of a milk and soda or a mineral. But how to get there was the rub. For the nonce he was rather nonplussed, but inasmuch as the duty plainly devolved upon him to take some measures on the subject, he pondered suitable ways and means, during which Stephen repeatedly yawned. So far as he could see, he was rather pale in the face of that. It occurred to him as highly advisable to get a conveyance of some description which would answer in their then condition, both of them being aged, particularly Stephen, always assuming that there was such a thing to be found. Accordingly, after a few such preliminaries as brushing, in spite of his having forgotten to take up his rather subsidy handkerchief after it had done yeoman service in the shaving line, they both walked together along Beaver Street, or, more properly, then as far as the farriers and the distinctly fitted atmosphere of the livery stables at the corner of Montgomery Street, where they made tracks to the left from thence, debouching into Amiens Street round by the corner of Dunbridgeons. But as he confidently anticipated, there was not a sign of a Jew plying for her anywhere to be seen except a four-wheeler, probably engaged by some fellows inside on the spree, outside the North Star Hotel, and there was no symptom of its budging a quarter of an inch when Mr. Bloom, who was anything but a professional, was Sir, endeavoured to hail it by emitting a kind of a whistle, holding his arms arched over his head. Twice. This was a quandary, but bringing common sense to bear on it, evidently there was nothing for it but put a good face on the matter, and foot it, which they accordingly did. So, bivalling around by Mullet's and the signal house, which they shortly reached, they proceeded perforce in the direction of Amiens Street railway terminus, Mr. Bloom being handicapped by the circumstance that one of the back buttons of his trousers hat, to vary the time-honoured adage, gone the way of all buttons, though, entering thoroughly into the spirit of the thing, he heroically made light of the mischance, so as neither of them were particularly pressed for time, as it happened, and the temperature refreshing since it cleared up after the recent visitation of Jupiter previous. They jingled along past by where the empty vehicle was waiting without a fare or a jarvey. As it so happened, a Dublin United Tramways Company since Stewart happened to be returning, and the little man recounted to his companion propos of the incident his own truly miraculous escape of some little while back. They passed the main entrance of the Great Northern Railway Station, the starting point for Belfast, where of course all traffic was suspended at that late hour and passing the back door of the more not very enticing locality. Not to say gruesome to a degree. More especially at night ultimately gained the Duck Tavern and indecorous turned into Store Street, famous for its C Division police station. Between this point and the Hive prison and its warehouses of Beresford Place, Stephen thought. To think of it then, associated with birds, the stonecutter is in his mind somehow in Talbot Place. First turning on the right, while the other who was acting as his physicians inhaled with internal satisfaction the smell of James Rick City Bakery, situated quite close to where they were. The very palatable odour indeed of our daily bread. Of all commodities of the public, the primary and most indispensable. Bread, the staff of life. I knew bread. Oh, tell me where is fancy bread? Aperex the bakers, it is said. En route to his taciturn end. Not to put too fine a point on it. Not yet perfectly sober companion Mr. Bloom, who at all events was in complete possession of his faculties. Never more so. In fact, disgustingly sober. Spoke a word of caution re the dangers of Nighttown. Woman of fame and swommudsman. Which barely permissible once in a while, though not as a habitual practice, was of the nature of a regular deep trap for young fellows of his age particularly, if they had acquired drinking habits under the influence of liquor honest Unura. Little jiu-jitsu for every contingency, as even a fellow on the board of his back could administer a nasty kick if you didn't look out. Highly providential was the appearance on the scene of Corny Killeha when Stephen was blissfully unconscious but for that man in the gap turning up at the 11th hour there. Finney's might have been that he might have been a candidate for the accident word. Or, trailing that, the bride will in an appearance in the court next day before Mr. Tobias Orr. He being the solicitor rather. Old Wool. He meant to say, or Mahoney, which simply spelt ruin for a chap when it got bruited about. The reason he mentioned the fact was that a lot of those policemen, whom he cordially disliked, were admittedly unscrupulous in the service of the Crown and, as Mr. Bloom put it, were culling a case or two in the division in Clanbrassil Street, prepared to swear a hole through it in Gallingpot. Never on the spot one wanted, but in quiet parts of the city. Pembroke Road, for example. The guardians of the law were well in evidence. The obvious reason being they were paid to protect the upper classes. Another thing he commented on was equipping soldiers with firearms or sidearms of any description, liable to go off at any time, which was tantamount to inciting them against civilians, should by any chance they fell out over anything. He frittered away your time. He very sensibly maintained, and health and also character besides which, the squandermony of the thing. Fast women of the dim wind ran away with a lot of tea into the bargain, and the greatest danger of all was he got drunk with the touching the much vexed question of stimulants. He relished a glass of choice old wine in season as both nourishing and blue-macking, and possessing apparent virtues, notably a good Burgundy, which he was a staunch believer in. Still never beyond a certain point where he invariably drew the line, as it simply led to trouble all around, to say anything of your being at the tender mercy of others practically. Most of all, he commented adversely on the desertion of Stephen by all his pub hunting. Confers but one, A most glaring piece of writing on the part of his brother medicos in all. This irks. And that one was Judah's. Stephen said. He up to then had said nothing whatsoever of any kind. Discussing these and kindred topics, they made a beeline across the back of the custom house and passed under the loop line bridge where a brazier of coke burning in front of a cinder box or something like one attracted their rather lagging footsteps. Stephen of his own accord stopped for no special reason to look at the heap of burned cobblestones, and by the light emanating from the brazier he could just make out the darker figure of the corporation watchman inside the gloom of the cinder box. He began to remember that this had happened, or had been mentioned as having happened before, but it cost him no small effort before he remembered that he recognised in the century a quondam friend of his father's, Gunny. To avoid a meeting, he drew nearer to the pillars of the railway bridge. Someone saluted you, Mr. Bloom said. Might. Stephen, of course, started rather dizzily and stopped to return the compliment. Mr. Bloom, actuated by motives of inherent delicacy, inasmuch as he always believed in minding his own business, moved off, but nevertheless remained on the qui vive with just a shade of anxiety, though not funcation in the least. Though unusual in the Dublin area, he knew that it was not by any means unknown for desperados who had next to nothing to live on to be abroad waylaying and generally terrorising peaceable pedestrians by placing a pistol at their head in some secluded spot outside the city proper. Famished loiterers of the Thames embankment category, they might be hanging about there, or simply Morodos ready to decamp with whatever boodle they could in one fell swoop at a moment's notice. Your money or your life, leaving you there to point a moral, gagged and garroted. Stephen. That is when the costing figure came to close quarters. Though he was not in an over-sober state himself, recognised Quelly's breath redolent of wort and corn juice. Ward John Quelly, some called him, and his genealogy came about in this wise. He was eldest son of Inspector Corley of the G Division, lately deceased, who had married a certain Catherine Brophy, the daughter of a last farmer. His grandfather, Patrick Michael Corley of New Ross, had married the widow of a publican. Their maiden name had been Catherine, also Talbot. Rumour had it, though not proved, that she descended from the house of the Lords Talbot de Malahide and Usmunchin, really an unquestionably fine residence of its kind and well worth seeing. Her mother or aunt or some relative, a woman, as the tale went, of extreme beauty, had enjoyed the distinction of being in service in the Washington. This therefore was the reason why the still comparatively young though dissolute man who now addressed Stephen was spoken of by some with facetious proclivities as Lord John Corley. Taking Stephen on one side, he had the customary doleful ditty to tell. Not as much as a farthing to purchase a night's lodgings. His friends had all deserted him. Furthermore, he had a row with Lenhen and called him to Stephen a mean bloody swab, with a sprinkling of a number of other uncalled for expressions. He was out of a job and implored of Stephen to tell him whereon. God, if he could get something, anything at all, to do. No. It was the daughter of the mother in the wash kitchen that was sister to the heir of the house, or else they were connected through the mother in some way. Both occurrences happening at the same time if the whole thing wasn't a complete fabrication. From start to finish. Anyhow, he was all in. I wouldn't ask you only, pursued he. On my solemn oath, and God knows I'm on the rocks. There'll be a job tomorrow or next day. Stephen told him. In a boys' school at Dalkey for a gentleman usher. Mr. Garrett Deasy. Try it. You may mention my name. All. Odd. Corley replied. Sure, I couldn't teach in a school. And I was never one of your bright ones. He added with a half laugh. I got stuck twice in the junior at the Christian Brothers. I have no place to sleep myself. Stephen informed him. Corley at the first go off was inclined to suspect it was something to do with Stephen being fired out of his digs for bringing in a bloody dart off the street. There was a doss house in Marlborough Street. Mrs. Mullany's. But it was only a tenner kitchen full of undesirables, but McConaughey told him. You got a decent enough deer in the brazen head over in Winataven Street, which was distantly suggestive to the person addressed to Friar Bacon for a bob. He was starving too, though he hadn't said a word about it. Though this sort of thing went on every other night or very near still. Stephen's feelings got the better of him in a sense, though he knew that Corley's brand new rigmarole on a par with that others was hardly deserving of much credence. However, hod ignore small or misery succor discoid such as the Latin bird remarks especially as. Luck would have it he got paid his screw after every middle of the month. On the 16th, which was the date of the month, as a matter of fact. Though a good bit of the wherewithal is demolished. But the cream of the joke was nothing would get it out of Cully's head. That he was living in affluence and hadn't a thing to do but hang out. The needful. Whereas he put his hand in a pocket and not with the idea of finding any food there, but thinking he might lend him anything up to Bob or so. In lieu of it, he might endeavour at all events and get sufficient to eat. But the result was in the negative, for to his chagrin, he found his cash missing. A few broken biscuits were all the result of his investigation. He tried his hardest to recollect for the moment whether he had lost as well. He might have all left, because in that contingency it was not a pleasant lookout. Very much the reverse, in fact. He was altogether too failed out to institute a thorough search, though he tried to recollect. About biscuits he dimly remembered. Who now exactly gave them he wondered, or where was ordered he by. However, in another pocket he came across what he surmised in the dark where pen is. Erroneously, however, as it turned out. Those are half-crowns. And Corley corrected him. And so in point of fact they turned out to be. Stephen and Hal lent him one of them. Thanks. Corley unsolved. You're a gentleman. To be continued.